The diplomatic vessel Convergence shuddered violently as another wave of spatial distortion slammed into its shields. Inside the bridge, 4 alien species scrambled at their stations, while warning alarms screamed through the corridors. Ambassador Rolf's 4 arms moved frantically across holographic displays, her chitinous green exoskeleton reflecting the emergency red lights. Her compound eyes tracked dozens of readouts simultaneously, each one bringing worse news than the last. "Navigation systems are completely blind," Captain Brunn growled, his scaled fingers gripping the command console until his claws left marks in the metal. The reptilian officer had served in the Concordance military for 30 years, survived 3 border wars, and never felt fear like this. His vertical pupils dilated as he watched their position markers spin uselessly on the tactical display. They were somewhere in the shroud sector, but exactly where remained a deadly mystery. Dr. Oven's webbed hands trembled as he checked life support readings. The amphibious scientist's smooth blood-rust skin had turned pale, his large black eyes wider than usual. Hull integrity dropping to 60%. The gravitational shear is tearing us apart slowly. We have maybe 48 hours before structural collapse. His voice carried the clinical tone of someone delivering a death sentence. Engineer Pulla's crystalline body pulsed with anxious orange light instead of her usual calm blue. The geometric patterns inside her translucent form flickered erratically as she rerouted power from non-essential systems. "I can extend that to maybe 50 hours if we shut down everything except core life support, but we still cannot navigate out of here. The spatial distortions make every direction equally dangerous." In the corner of the bridge, Daniel Russ stood quietly with his hands clasped behind his back. The human cultural attaché had been assigned to this diplomatic mission almost as an afterthought. Humanity had joined the Concordance only 15 years ago, and most elder species still viewed them as curiosities rather than equals. Daniel wore the standard gray and blue diplomatic jumpsuit, and his calm demeanor seemed out of place among the panic surrounding him. "The rescue beacon is not transmitting," Rolf clicked her mandibles in distress. "We are in a restricted zone. No ship will enter here to search for us. The regulations are absolute." She turned to Captain Brunn with a desperate gesture. "We must attempt to navigate out immediately, regulations or not." Brunn's tail lashed in frustration. "With what navigation? Our sensors show nothing but chaos. Every direction reads as a gravitational anomaly. If we move blindly, we will fly straight into a spatial rift and be torn into atoms." He slammed his fist on the console. "We are trapped like prey animals." Daniel cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me, but I might be able to help with the sensor array." All 4 aliens turned to stare at him as if they had forgotten he was there. "The external array on Section 7 is misaligned. It got knocked loose when we hit that first distortion wave. If someone realigns it manually, we might get clearer readings." Oven's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. Manual realignment means going outside. In this environment, that is suicide. The radiation levels alone would kill anyone in minutes. Add the gravitational shear and microdebris impacts, and survival time drops to seconds. "I can handle it," Daniel said simply. He walked over to the equipment locker and began pulling out an EVA suit. "You most certainly cannot," Rolf protested, her voice rising to a sharp chittering sound. "Humans are fragile. Your species evolved on a stable world with minimal radiation exposure. You have no resistance to these conditions whatsoever." She moved to block his path with 2 of her arms. "This is not bravery. This is ignorance of your own limitations." Daniel paused and looked at her with patient brown eyes. "Ambassador, I grew up in the Australian outback where summer temperatures hit 50 degrees Celsius. I spent 5 years working in deep-sea mining operations at depths that would crush most ships. I have been exposed to more environmental extremes than you might think." He pulled the EVA suit on with practiced ease. "Earth is not as stable as you believe." Pulla's internal lights shifted to confused purple. But our database shows Earth as a standard Class M world suitable for carbon-based life. The environmental parameters fall within normal ranges for inhabited planets. Your database lists averages, Daniel said as he sealed his helmet. It does not mention the radiation spikes at high altitude, the pressure extremes of our oceans, the temperature swings between our poles and equator, or the fact that my planet regularly tries to kill everything living on it through storms, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. He checked his suit's oxygen levels. Humans learn to adapt or die. Most of us chose adaptation. Brunn studied the human with new interest. Even if you survive the EVA, the gravitational shear will disorient you completely. You will not be able to maintain your position long enough to complete repairs. I will manage, Daniel replied. He moved toward the airlock. Besides, what choice do we have? If we sit here doing nothing, we all die anyway. At least this way we have a chance. The four aliens exchanged glances, their different species united in shared doubt. Finally, Brunn gave a curt nod. Proceed, but if your biosigns start failing, I am pulling you back immediately. Daniel entered the airlock and waited for the cycle to complete. Through the small window, he could see the swirling chaos of the shroud sector. Purple and crimson clouds twisted in impossible patterns, and space itself seemed to bend and warp like liquid. Energy ribbons crackled between invisible currents, and stars stretched into distorted spirals through gravitational lensing. The outer door opened, and Daniel pushed himself into the maelstrom. The radiation counters on his suit immediately spiked into red zones. Gravity pulled at him from 3 different directions at once, trying to tear him apart. Microdebris pinged against his helmet like deadly hail. On the bridge, Oven watched the biomonitors with growing horror. His radiation exposure is 5 times lethal dose already. He should be unconscious or dead. But Daniel's voice came through the comm steady and calm. I have reached the sensor array. Beginning realignment now. Should take about 20 minutes. In the background, they could hear him humming an old Earth song while he worked. 90 minutes later, Daniel cycled back through the airlock. His EVA suit scorched and pitted from microdebris impacts. The radiation badge on his chest glowed an angry red that should have indicated a corpse inside the suit. Instead, he removed his helmet and smiled tiredly at the 4 stunned aliens staring at him. Sensor array is fully operational now, he reported. Also noticed some interesting patterns out there while I was working. Dr. Oven rushed forward with a medical scanner, his webbed hands shaking as he passed the device over Daniel's body. The readings made no sense. This is impossible. You absorbed enough radiation to kill a Quillen 3 times over. Your cellular structure should be breaking down. Instead, your cells are actively repairing damage faster than it accumulates. He looked up at Daniel with something like fear in his large black eyes. What are you? Daniel shrugged and accepted a water pouch from Engineer Pulla. Just human. My grandmother lived in Chernobyl exclusion zone for 40 years after the disaster. My grandfather was a uranium miner. Turns out humans have pretty good radiation resistance when we need it. He drank deeply, then added, though I will probably feel terrible tomorrow. Captain Brunn pulled up the newly calibrated sensor data on the main display. His scaled face twisted in confusion. These readings are still chaotic. I see no navigational solution. Every route shows lethal gravitational stress and spatial ruptures. May I? Daniel stepped up to the console. His fingers moved across the holographic interface, highlighting certain data streams and filtering others. You are looking at too much information at once. See these fluctuations here. He pointed to a series of seemingly random spikes. And these corresponding dips in radiation levels, they are connected. The spatial distortions follow a rhythm. Rolf's mandibles clicked skeptically. Rhythm implies pattern. Chaos, by definition, has no pattern. The concordance classified this region as restricted precisely because navigation is mathematically impossible. Mathematically impossible for your navigation systems, maybe. Daniel replied without offense. But I spent 3 years sailing Earth's oceans before joining the diplomatic corps. Ocean currents look chaotic too until you learn to read them. Wind patterns, temperature gradients, pressure systems, they all interact in ways that seem random but actually follow predictable cycles. He expanded the sensor view to show a 12-hour timeline. Look, every 7 hours and 14 minutes, there is a stability window where the gravitational eddies align. It only lasts about 8 minutes, but that should be enough to move us 3,000 kilometers closer to open space. Paula's crystalline form shifted to interested green light. She ran the calculations through her engineering systems. His mathematics are correct. I cannot explain how he perceived the pattern, but it exists. If we execute a course correction during the next window, we can break free from the current gravitational trap. That window opens in 6 hours, Brun noted, his tactical mind already planning the maneuver. But even if we escape this immediate trap, we remain deep in the restricted zone. We need a way to navigate through dozens of similar hazards. I can do that, Daniel said quietly. The 4 aliens turned to him again. While I was outside, I watched how space moves out here. It is not random. Think of it like weather patterns on a planet. Storms form, travel, dissipate, and reform. The shroud sector is the same. Once you understand the patterns, you can predict safe paths. Oven's scientific curiosity overcame his shock. How can you perceive patterns our instruments miss? Our sensors can detect fluctuations across hundreds of different spectrums simultaneously. Your biological eyes are limited to a narrow band of visible light. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat down, finally showing some fatigue. Your instruments are designed for stable environments. They expect consistency and measure deviations from a baseline. But I grew up in Australia where the environment changes constantly. Humans learn to recognize patterns in chaos because that is what kept us alive for millions of years. We watch how dust moves in the air and predict tomorrow's weather. We see how water flows around rocks and map entire river systems in our heads. We read tiny changes in animal behavior and know when predators are near. He gestured at the swirling chaos outside the viewport. This is different in scale, but the principle is the same. Nature always has patterns if you know how to look. Rolf settled into her chair, all 4 arms folded in thought. Your world sounds exhausting. My homeworld has stable seasons, predictable weather patterns, and minimal geological activity. We evolved in harmony with our environment. Most species did, Paula added. The Concordance database shows that stable planetary conditions are the norm for intelligent life. Extreme environmental variability is considered a barrier to civilization development. Daniel smiled sadly. Or maybe it is exactly what forces civilization to develop. Humans had to become smart and adaptable because our planet gave us no choice. We built tools because we lacked natural weapons. We learned agriculture because food sources were unreliable. We created complex languages because we needed to share survival knowledge across generations. He stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the deadly beauty of the shroud sector. You call this place restricted because it is dangerous to you, but danger is relative. This environment would be considered moderate risk back home. Brun approached to stand beside him. You truly believe you can navigate us through this entire region? Yes, Daniel answered without hesitation. Though I should mention the derelict station I spotted about 40,000 kilometers from here. Sensors barely registered it, but I saw lights. Faint, but definitely artificial. If it has working communication equipment, we could call for rescue properly instead of hopping someone here's our beacon. A station in the shroud sector, Oven gasped. That would predate the Concordance. The restricted zone classifications are over 6,000 years old. Daniel nodded slowly, which means someone built it here when this place was not restricted, someone who could survive here, maybe even thrive here. He turned to face the crew. I think we should investigate after we make this first course correction. We might learn something important about why the Concordance is so afraid of this place. The course correction went exactly as Daniel predicted. When the stability window opened, Captain Brunn executed the maneuver with precision while Daniel called out micro-adjustments based on gravitational currents invisible to the ship's sensors. The Convergence shuddered and groaned as forces tried to tear it apart, but they emerged from the gravitational eddy intact and with improved position. Life support is stabilizing, Pulla reported, her crystalline form glowing with relieved blue light. Hull stress has decreased significantly. We have bought ourselves time. Ambassador Rolf accessed the long-range communication systems, trying once again to send a distress signal. The results were the same as before. Communication is still impossible. The spatial distortions are scrambling all frequencies. We remain trapped and isolated. Then the derelict station is our best option, Daniel said, studying the sensor readings. He had spent the past hour mapping the route, identifying safe corridors through the chaos. I can get us there in about 4 hours if we follow the gravitational currents instead of fighting them. Brunn's tail swished thoughtfully. We would be deviating from standard rescue protocols. If a Concordance ship does pick up our beacon, they will search along our original trajectory, not deeper into the restricted zone. If a Concordance ship enters this zone at all, Daniel countered gently. The regulations are clear. Restricted zones are absolute. They will not risk a rescue vessel in here. Our only real chance is finding working communication equipment at that station and calling for help from a location they can safely reach. Oven ran calculations on his medical tablet. The human makes strategic sense. Waiting for rescue that may never come is slower death than attempting to reach the station. He paused, studying Daniel with renewed interest. I have been analyzing your cellular structure from the EVA suit's biomonitors. Your adaptive mechanisms are remarkable. Your cells can switch between different metabolic pathways depending on environmental stress. Most species have one optimized pathway. Humans have dozens of backup systems. Evolution on a Duthwald, Daniel replied. Earth went through multiple extinction events. Ice ages, meteor impacts, supervolcano eruptions, radical climate shifts. Only the most adaptable organisms survived each catastrophe. Humans are descended from millions of years of survivors who had to handle whatever the planet threw at them. Pulla's internal lights pulsed with curiosity. My species evolved on a crystalline world with stable conditions for over 2 billion years. We achieved technological civilization because our environment remained constant long enough for complex thought to develop. Environmental stability is considered essential for intelligence. Maybe, Daniel conceded, but environmental pressure creates a different kind of intelligence, adaptability, problem-solving under stress, the ability to thrive in multiple different conditions instead of being optimized for just one. He brought up the navigation plot, which is exactly what we need right now. Should we proceed to the station? Rolf looked at her fellow crew members. This decision violated every protocol she had spent her career upholding. The Concordance had rules for good reasons. Restricted zones killed those who ignored the warnings. Yet they were already deep in violation just by being here, and the human had proven correct about everything so far. Proceed, she decided, but carefully. Unknown installations in restricted zones could be dangerous in ways we cannot predict. The journey to the derelict station revealed more of Daniel's unusual capabilities. He piloted them through spatial hazards that would have destroyed any automated navigation system. When sensors showed only chaos, he guided them by watching how radiation patterns flowed and how gravity wells interacted. He explained his reasoning in simple terms that made sense after the fact, but none of the aliens could perceive what he saw until he pointed it out. There, Daniel indicated a relatively calm corridor between two massive gravitational whirlpools. We ride the boundary current. It will pull us along like a river and deposit us right at the station's coordinates. That corridor is only 800 meters wide, Brunn protested. Our ship is 300 meters at its widest point. The margin for error is minimal. Then I will not make errors, Daniel said with quiet confidence. His hands moved smoothly across the piloting controls, making constant tiny adjustments that kept them centered in the safe zone. Around them, space twisted and buckled. Stars stretched into spirals. Energy discharges lit up the darkness like lightning in a storm, but the convergence glided through untouched. When the derelict station appeared on visual sensors, all 5 crew members stared in wonder. The structure was massive, easily 10 times the size of the convergence. Its architecture was unlike anything in the Concordance database. Angular geometric shapes interlocked in ways that seemed to defy physics. The hull material was dark and pitted with age, covered in symbols and writing that predated modern galactic languages. I am detecting minimal power signatures, Pola reported. Some systems are still active after all this time. Remarkable engineering. And familiar, Oven added quietly. His amphibious features were troubled as he studied the station's design. The gravitational coefficients of the structure match high-gravity world construction. Whoever built this evolved on a planet significantly more massive than standard. Daniel studied the alien writing covering the hull. He could not read it, but something about the bold, angular strokes reminded him of human engineering from Earth's industrial age. Practical, robust, built to endure. A Deathworld species, he said, like humans. That is my conclusion as well, Oven confirmed. Which raises uncomfortable questions. The Concordance has records going back 12,000 years. Yet I find no mention of another Deathworld species achieving spaceflight. What happened to them? We should dock and investigate, Daniel suggested. The answers are probably inside, plus we still need that communication equipment. Breen maneuvered the convergence alongside the station, finding a docking port that, remarkably, still functioned. Ancient systems activated when they approached, extending a docking tube that sealed against their airlock with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Atmosphere inside reads as breathable, Pola announced, surprise evident in her voice. Oxygen-nitrogen mix, slightly higher pressure than standard but within tolerance for all our species. Life support has been running for thousands of years. Someone expected visitors, Rilth observed, or inhabitants. Daniel checked his sidearm, a simple plasma pistol issued to all diplomatic personnel. Only one way to find out what is in there. I will take points since I seem to be the most resistant to environmental hazards. I will accompany you, Pola volunteered. You need someone with technical expertise to evaluate any equipment we find. The 2 of them entered the airlock, while the others monitored from the bridge. The interior of the ancient station was cold and dark, except for dim emergency lighting that flickered on as Daniel and Pola moved through the corridors. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Dust floated in the beams of their helmet lights, undisturbed for millennia. The architecture is designed for beings slightly larger than humans, Daniel observed, running his hand along a wall. But the proportions feel familiar. Doors, ceiling height, corridor width, they all suggest bipedal species with similar physical dimensions to us. Pola's crystalline form casts strange shadows in her own internal light. The construction materials are extremely dense, high-gravity world confirmed. These beings would have been incredibly strong by concordant standards. She paused at a wall panel covered in those angular symbols. I am detecting active data cores nearby. The computer systems are still powered. They found the main control room 3 levels deeper into the station. It was a circular chamber with terminals arranged around a central holographic projector. When they entered, ancient sensors detected their presence, and the projector activated with a flicker of yellow light. A figure appeared in the hologram. It was humanoid, standing on 2 legs with 2 arms, but taller and broader than any human. Its face had heavy features, thick bones designed to support massive muscles. The being in the recording wore simple clothing and stood in what looked like a command station similar to this one. Then it began speaking. The language was unknown, but the station's computer translated into modern concordance standard. The voice was deep and tired. If anyone finds this message, know that we were the Veiler. We evolved on a world of crushing gravity, violent storms, and predators that hunted from sea, land, and air. We clawed our way to sentience through blood and perseverance. We built tools, tamed fire, and eventually reached for the stars. The hologram shifted to show images of a planet. Its surface was scarred with massive mountain ranges, deep ocean trenches, and storm systems that covered entire continents. Our homeworld veil taught us strength. It taught us endurance. It taught us to adapt or perish. When we finally achieved spaceflight, we found the galaxy filled with others, peaceful species who had evolved on gentle worlds. They had built a great alliance called the Concordance. More images appeared. Alien species Daniel recognized from history databases, though younger versions than their modern descendants. We sought to join them. We offered our strength, our engineering, our unique perspectives born from surviving the impossible. We wanted to contribute. The hologram showed the Veiler representatives standing before a council of elder species. But they were afraid. They saw our strength as violence, our adaptability as unpredictability, our survival instincts as aggression. They declared our species a potential threat. They classified our homeworld and forbade us from settling beyond our star system. Pola's lights dimmed to sorrowful purple. They were quarantined, restricted. We built this station in secret, the recording continued. Here in the region they called the Shroud Sector, a place their ships feared to travel. We could navigate here easily. The spatial distortions were challenging but manageable for beings who evolved dodging hypercanes and gravitational anomalies in our home system. We used this place as a refuge, a symbol that we would not be contained. The hologram showed the station being constructed, Veiler workers moving with confidence through the same deadly environment that nearly killed the Convergence. We attempted for 3 generations to prove ourselves. We remained peaceful. We offered aid when disasters struck Concordance worlds. We shared our technology freely. But fear is stronger than evidence. The elder species tightened their restrictions. They declared all restricted zones absolute. They banned travel to any region where we might have advantage over them. Daniel felt his chest tighten with familiar anger. Throughout human history, people had been feared and restricted for being different, for being stronger or faster or smarter in ways that made others uncomfortable. He had hoped the galaxy might be better than that. Eventually, we accepted the truth, the Veiler continued. The Concordance would never allow Deathworld species to exist as equals. Our very existence challenged their comfortable assumptions about civilization. So we made a choice. Rather than fight or submit to slow extinction through isolation, we left. We took our ships and headed beyond known space to find new worlds where we could build our own future. The hologram showed a fleet of powerful ships departing the station. We leave this message and this facility for any other Deathworld species who might one day face the same prejudice. The communication equipment here can reach any part of Concordance space. The navigation data we compiled shows safe routes through all the restricted zones. Use them. Prove that we Deathworld species can go where the elder species fear to tread. The recording shifted to show the Veiler standing alone now, ancient and weathered. To whoever finds this, we offer you a warning and a hope. The warning is that the Concordance's fear of Deathworld species is not rational. It is instinctive. They will find reasons to restrict you no matter how peaceful you are. The hope is that perhaps you will succeed where we failed. Perhaps you will show them that strength and adaptability are gifts, not threats. Perhaps you will break the chains they place on those who remind them of their own limitations. The hologram flickered and died. Silence filled the control room. Pola's voice was barely a whisper. This is not in any Concordance historical record. The Veiler are completely unknown to modern databases. It is as if they were erased. Daniel moved to the nearest terminal and activated it. Data streams appeared, showing star charts, navigation routes, communication protocols, and technical specifications far beyond current concordance standards. They did not want to be forgotten. They left everything here, a gift to the next Deathworld species that the concordance tried to limit. "You mean humans," Pola said quietly. "Maybe," Daniel replied. He found the communication system and began studying its controls. Or maybe there are others out there too, other species on high-gravity worlds or planets with extreme environments, other peoples who evolved through hardship and emerged strong. He activated a control panel. "But right now, let us focus on calling for rescue. We can decide what to do with the rest of this information once we are safe." The communication array powered up with a deep hum that resonated through the station's superstructure. It had waited thousands of years for someone to use it again. Now it would finally fulfill its purpose. The distress signal transmitted successfully on multiple concordance emergency frequencies. Within 3 hours, they received a response. The message came from High Admiral Torvin of the Concordance Rescue Fleet, his avian features sharp with authority on the holographic display. "Convergence, we have received your transmission. Maintain your current position. A rescue fleet will arrive in approximately 72 hours. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to navigate out of the restricted zone. That is a direct order." Captain Breen acknowledged the transmission, but his expression was troubled. After the channel closed, he pulled up tactical displays showing the rescue fleet's projected route. "They are taking the long way around, a path that avoids the Shroud sector entirely. The journey would be 6 times shorter if they came through directly." "They cannot," Rilth said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "The regulations forbid concordance vessels from entering restricted zones. The routes are classified as impossible to navigate safely." Daniel studied the projected timeline. He had spent the past hour reviewing the Veiler navigation data, comparing it to his own observations of the spatial patterns. "I could get us out of here in 12 hours. There is a direct route to open space." The Veiler mapped it completely. The gravitational currents are predictable once you understand the cycles. "Absolutely not," Torvin's voice came through again. Apparently he had been monitoring their channel. "You will wait for proper rescue. Any attempt to navigate the restricted zone will result in court-martial for the command crew and sanctions against Earth for violating safety protocols." Breen muted the channel and turned to Daniel. "He is serious. The concordance does not make idle threats." "I know," Daniel replied calmly. "But I also know our hull integrity is deteriorating faster than Dr. Oven's initial estimates. The gravitational stress is cumulative. We might not have 72 hours." Oven checked his readings and his face went pale. "The human is correct. I did not account for microfractures accumulating in the hull plating. At current rates, we will experience catastrophic failure in approximately 48 hours. The rescue fleet cannot reach us in time." Pola projected the Veiler navigation data onto the main display. "This route is detailed and comprehensive. They traveled it hundreds of times. The spatial distortions follow patterns, just as Daniel suggested. With this data and his navigational abilities, success is highly probable." "But it violates direct orders," Rilth protested, though her tone suggested she was arguing with herself as much as the others. "If we succeed, we prove that restricted zones can be navigated. That calls into question thousands of years of concordance policy. The political ramifications would be immense." "If we fail, we die," Breen countered. "But if we wait, we also die. The choice is between certain death and possible survival." He looked at each crew member in turn. "I will not order anyone to take this risk. It must be unanimous." Dr. Oven spoke first, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "I vote to proceed. The data we have gathered about human adaptive capabilities and the Valar history is too valuable to lose. If there is any chance to deliver this information to the Concordance, we must take it. Pola's crystalline form glowed with determined green light. I vote to proceed. As an engineer, I cannot ignore evidence. The Valar navigation data is sound. Their engineering is superior to current Concordance standards in many ways. We should trust it. Rilth was silent for a long moment, her four arms folded in thought. I have spent my entire career upholding Concordance protocols, following the rules, trusting the wisdom of the elder species. She looked at the Valar data, then at Daniel. But I have also spent the past day watching those rules be proven wrong repeatedly. I vote to proceed, though it may cost me everything I have built. Breen nodded slowly. Then it is decided. Daniel, you have command of navigation. Get us out of here. Admiral Torvin's voice erupted from the speakers, furious. You will do no such thing. This is mutiny. You are ordered to remain stationary and await rescue. Any deviation will be met with the full force of Concordance military law. Daniel unmuted the channel. Admiral, with respect, remaining here means we die. Our hull will fail before your fleet arrives. We have navigation data that proves this route is survivable. We are not being reckless. We are making an informed decision to save our lives. You are making an emotional decision based on fear, Torvin snapped. Restricted zones are restricted for good reason. Thousands of years of experience have proven certain regions of space are impassable. Your human arrogance in thinking you know better than the accumulated wisdom of the Concordance is exactly why your species should never have been granted membership. The words hung in the air like poison. Rilth's mandibles clicked in anger. That statement was inappropriate, Admiral. Daniel has saved our lives multiple times today through skill, not arrogance. He has gotten lucky, Torvin retorted. Luck runs out. When it does, you will all die, and your deaths will be used as evidence for why restricted zones must remain absolute. You will become a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring established protocols. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not about safety or regulations. This was about control. The Concordance had created restricted zones to limit Deathworld species like the Valar, and now they were using those same restrictions to maintain their power over humanity and any other species that might challenge their comfortable assumptions. We are proceeding with navigation, Breen announced formally. Let it be logged that I take full responsibility for this decision. My crew acted under my orders and should face no sanctions. He closed the channel before Torvin could respond. Daniel took his position at the navigation console. The Valar data integrated smoothly with the Convergence's systems, overlaying safe routes through the chaos. He took a deep breath and let his hands settle on the controls. This was not just about survival anymore. This was about proving that Deathworld species deserved their place among the stars. Beginning navigation sequence, he announced. Hold on to something. This is going to be interesting. The Convergence's engines powered up, and they began moving through the Shroud sector along a route the Concordance claimed was impossible. Space twisted around the Convergence like a living thing. Purple and crimson nebula clouds swirled past the viewports in patterns that defied physics. Gravitational waves pulled at the ship from impossible angles. Energy discharges lit up the darkness with crackling brilliance. But Daniel navigated through it all with steady hands and calm focus. Spatial rift approaching on Vector 270, he called out. Adjusting course to ride the gravitational shear, it will slingshot us past. The ship tilted sharply as he executed the maneuver. Warning alarms screamed as hull stress reached critical levels, but Daniel had calculated precisely how much the Convergence could endure. They skimmed along the edge of the rift, using its gravity to accelerate them forward, then broke free on the far side with momentum that carried them through the next hazard zone. How are you doing this? Owen asked, watching the sensor feeds in amazement. The spatial distortions are changing faster than our computers can track, yet you anticipate them consistently. Daniel's eyes never left the viewport. I am watching the nebula clouds. See how they move. They follow the gravitational currents. Where the clouds spiral, gravity is pulling inward. Where they scatter, gravity is pushing outward. The patterns repeat every few minutes. Once you recognize the cycle, you can predict what comes next. But that requires processing dozens of variables simultaneously, Pola protested. Gravitational coefficients, radiation densities, spatial curvature rates, momentum vectors. Even our computers struggle with the calculations. I'm not calculating, Daniel replied. I am feeling it, like a sailor feels wind and current, like a climber feels stone and balance. Humans evolved to process environmental information intuitively. We had to, or we died. He banked the ship hard to avoid a gravitational whirlpool. Your computers try to understand everything. I just accept what the environment is telling me and adapt. 4 hours into the journey, they encountered the most dangerous obstacle yet. A massive spatial rift tore across their path, a wound in reality itself that stretched for thousands of kilometers. On the sensors, it read as absolute death. No known material could survive passage through that level of gravitational shear. We cannot go around it, Breen observed. The route diverges too far. We would add 8 hours to our journey. We do not go around, Daniel said quietly. We go through. He studied the rift carefully, watching how space bent and twisted at its edges. It is not solid. See those fluctuations. The rift is breathing, expanding, and contracting. When it contracts, there is a narrow corridor along the edge where the gravitational forces partially cancel each other out. We have about 90 seconds to transit during the contraction phase. Rilth's 4 arms gripped her chair. Partially cancel is not the same as safe passage. We could still be torn apart. Yes, Daniel agreed. But we will not be. I have watched this rift for the past 20 minutes. The contraction cycle is regular. The safe corridor is real. I can get us through. He waited, hands poised over the controls, watching the rift pulse and writhe. The crew held their collective breath. Then, precisely at the moment the rift began contracting, Daniel pushed the engines to maximum and dove straight toward the center of the spatial wound. The convergence shook violently as competing gravitational forces tried to tear it in different directions. Hull plating screamed under stress. Lights flickered, but Daniel's hands moved constantly across the controls, making micro-adjustments that kept them centered in the safe corridor. He was not fighting the forces around them. He was dancing with them, letting the ship flow through chaos like water finding the path of least resistance. 90 seconds later, they emerged on the far side of the rift, battered but intact. Owen checked the hull integrity readings and laughed with relief. We survived. The stress was enormous but within tolerance. Barely. That was the last major obstacle, Daniel announced. Open space is 4 hours ahead. The route from here is relatively straightforward. The remainder of the journey proved him correct. They navigated through several more hazard zones, but nothing as challenging as what they had already overcome. Daniel guided them with the same steady confidence, and gradually the shroud sector's chaos gave way to normal space. When they finally crossed the boundary into open space, the difference was striking. Stars stopped warping. Gravity behaved predictably. Space itself became calm and ordinary. On the sensors, they could see Admiral Torvin's rescue fleet approaching from the opposite direction, still hours away from reaching the restricted zone's edge. We are clear, Breen announced. All systems nominal, hull integrity at 42% but stable. We survived. The communication channel activated, and Torvin's furious face appeared. But before he could speak, Rilth cut him off. Admiral, the Convergence has successfully navigated through the shroud sector using historical data and human navigational techniques. We are transmitting our complete sensor logs now, along with recovered data from a pre-concordance station we discovered inside the restricted zone. I believe you will find the information extremely relevant to multiple concordance policies. Torvin's beak clicked with barely controlled rage. You violated direct orders. You risked your lives on reckless assumptions. You have broken protocols that exist for the safety of all spacefaring species. We followed navigation data compiled by the Veiler, Daniel interjected calmly, a Deathworld species that the Concordance quarantined thousands of years ago. They mapped the Shroud sector completely and used it as a refuge. The restricted zone classifications were not created because the regions were impossible to navigate. They were created to limit where species like the Veiler and humans could travel. Silence filled the channel as Torvin processed this statement. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. That is a serious accusation with no evidence. The evidence is in the data we are transmitting, Pola said. The Veiler left complete historical records. They documented their attempts to join the Concordance peacefully. They recorded the restrictions placed on them. They explained why they eventually left known space entirely. Dr. Oven added, I have also compiled comprehensive biological data on human adaptive capabilities. Daniel survived radiation exposure and gravitational stress that would kill most concordant species. These are not unusual abilities for Deathworld evolution. The Veiler likely possessed similar advantages. The Concordance's fear of such species appears to have shaped policy for millennia. Torvin's expression was unreadable. This data will need to be reviewed by the Concordance Council. Your testimony will be required, all of you. We welcome the opportunity, Rilth replied. The galaxy deserves to know its true history, and Deathworld species deserve to be judged by their actions, not feared for their capabilities. The channel closed. The rescue fleet altered course to rendezvous with the Convergence in open space. As the two groups of ships drew closer, Daniel stood at the viewport and looked back at the Shroud sector. The purple and crimson clouds still swirled with deadly beauty, hiding secrets and possibilities that most species would never explore. But humans would, and perhaps other Deathworld species out there among the stars would too. The Veiler had left them a gift, a map to regions the Concordance had declared forbidden. With that knowledge, the restrictions that had limited Deathworld species for thousands of years could finally be challenged. Daniel smiled quietly. Humanity had barely begun to explore the galaxy, and already they were revealing truths the elder species had tried to bury. Restricted space had hidden humanity's power for too long. Now the galaxy would learn what Deathworld species could truly accomplish when given the freedom to thrive.